What's up, guys? Here are my predictions for UFC Fight Night happening in Argentina this Saturday. And on paper, not the greatest card, but you never know, man. Last week's Fight Night was absolutely amazing. So we're going to start with the main card. Cynthia Calvillo versus Poliana Botelho. This should be a very competitive fight, and this actually means a lot for the future of their careers. Especially for Cynthia Calvillo. Losing 2 in a row is not going to do her any favors going forward in this division. And this is going to be somewhat of a grappler versus striker matchup, where Cynthia Calvillo is an amazing grappler, great BJJ, very, very dangerous with her submissions at every position. On the ground, I believe she's going to have a big advantage, but she's going to be the smaller fighter in there. So how much of the strength of Botelho going to play a factor when it gets to the ground, especially when she's trying to defend takedowns? Now that is going to be a big problem for Calvillo. Can she get down Botelho to utilize her massive advantage on the ground? It's going to be tough because Calvillo doesn't have the greatest takedowns. She's pretty good with trips and throws, but with the straightforward wrestling to get Patel off balance, it's going to be pretty tricky. She can try to get in the clinch, use her wild striking because Calvillo isn't the greatest striker. She's not too polished. She's trying to put it all together, it seems like, has decent kicks as well as lunging punches, but the distance to cover to get on Botelho is going to be dangerous because Botelho is somewhat of a finisher. I mean, she has an 86% knockout ratio. So covering the distance, especially on the initial entry, so with a jab or moving in with a long right hand or something like that, that's when Calvillo is going to be in the biggest trouble because Botelho is very aggressive, right? Her finishes usually come from her marching forward, landing big body kicks, long, strong punches. And if she can disrupt Calvillo's initial movement to go forward on her, that's when Botelho is going to capitalize. So if Botelho can land a jab as Calvillo is trying to come in, or an uppercut or a body kick, and halt the pressure of Calvillo, and then reverse the pressure and start moving Calvillo backwards, Botelho should win this fight. But if Calvillo is able to get away or under the initial intercepting shot of Botelho, Calvillo could potentially try to get this fight to the ground with her blitzing combinations, and then shooting it for a double or single, and then trying to trip out Botelho potentially against the cage or in the clinch. On the ground, I have Calvillo just winning almost every exchange. So my prediction for this fight, this is going to be pretty tough to call. I'm going to go with Cynthia Calvillo. I think the long stance of Botelho is going to give Calvillo an easier entry to try to take her down with a single leg and potentially drive it to the cage. It's that long stance that's going to be a big liability for Botelho here. Calvillo doesn't have to shoot that far to get in on her. So I got Calvillo, and I'm going to go by a third round submission or a decision. I see this being a pretty long fight. And then we go to Khalil Roundtree Jr. versus Johnny Walker. Now, this is going to be a very explosive and entertaining fight. Both strikers love to keep it on the feet. Khalil Roundtree is explosiveness personified, pretty much. I mean, everything he throws is there to knock anyone out. He can fight either stance, southpaw or orthodox, but he takes more of the southpaw stance, especially on orthodox fighters, where he can utilize his powerful left body kick, and he has an explosive lead right overhand counter. And he usually follows that up by a short left hook or even a left straight. And that left straight is going to be a big problem for Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker, on the other hand, he's an orthodox fighter and he fights extremely long. I mean, you look at his reach, 82 inches, and he uses all of it. His leg reach is insane as well. Even though they don't have it listed, his kicks look like they can scale the entire octagon. I mean, it's crazy. I've seen him throw spinning heel kicks and it's just scary to look at. But he's not nearly as fast as Roundtree, and I think not nearly as powerful. But he, of course, has power. He has a very long jab and right straight. Basically, the combination he relies on the most. But when he throws a jab and a straight, it's always flared out. It almost looks like they're coming over the top or under. They're not really down the pipe. It can glance off Roundtree when he's trying to slip on the punches, but there is a huge toe when he's going to throw them. And that right overhand of Khalil Roundtree is a perfect counter against Johnny Walker's jab and straight. But the thing about Walker is he can get pretty wild out there, right? He'll throw long flying knees, and on a southpaw fighter, it's a much bigger opening. There's a clear path down the center for the flying knee. And there's also a clearer path for the long right straight. I mean, he's going to have a 5.5 inch reach advantage, and he's also 2 inches taller. And he has a very long stance, and he fights long. So the outside foot right straight that he's going to be using is going to be a problem for Khalil Roundtree if Roundtree can't slip on the punch and land the overhand right. So my prediction for this fight, I'm going to go with Khalil Roundtree. I think he's more explosive. I think he can slip on the punches. He is already very tough. And there's a big thing about Walker in his fight against Henrique de Silva, who was a UFC fighter. He gassed out pretty early in that fight. And Khalil Roundtree, I've seen him go 3 rounds pretty well, even though how explosive he is. So I'm going to go with Roundtree. I'm going to go by a second round TKO. And then we go to the co-main event, Ricardo Lamas versus Darren Elkins. Now this is going to be a very fun fight. Lamas is very explosive, very well-rounded, more well-rounded than Darren Elkins is. He's much more polished in his striking. Everything is more sound and more powerful, that is. Elkins, he forces everything. All of his shots are really labored. He can land a high kick if it presents itself like he did against Mirsad Bektic. But Lamas is much more defensively responsible. The reason for that is he is such a veteran. I mean, he's fought the who's who in the featherweight division, and he fought lightweight before, so he's not a stranger to bigger guys, though Darren Elkins is going to be the bigger fighter in there. But Lamas, he has a very strong wrestling game, which can neutralize Elkins and keep it on the feet, where they're going to have to exchange with each other, and that's not going to play into Elkins' game. The biggest X factor about this fight is Elkins' toughness and his ability to always come back in fights, ability to take shots and just confuse his opponent in some way. Like, how is this guy not falling? But Ricardo Lamas, everything is down the pipe with his hands. He's very explosive moving forward. He has very good lateral movement, moving backwards, way faster than Elkins in every department. And his takedowns will be there if he has to go to that, but it's going to be risky against a guy like Elkins because I think Elkins might have a better overall ground game. And he's going to be forcing it on Lamas. But Lamas has pretty good takedown defense for the most part, especially on shots that are going to come from the open. But if Elkins really proves to be that strong in the clinch and eventually get it to the cage and take down Lamas, Lamas can have some problems, but I think the footwork is going to be more than enough to get away from takedowns from Elkins. So I'm going to go with Ricardo Lamas in this fight, and I'm going to go by a decision. I see him landing a bunch of shots, but I just see Elkins walking forward and taking all of them. They don't call him the damage for no reason. And then we go to the main event, Neil Magny versus Santiago Ponzinibbio. Interesting fight. You got probably the longest and tallest guy in the welterweight division in Neil Magny. I mean, he's going to have a 7-inch reach advantage while being 3 inches taller and a 5-inch leg reach advantage. And he fights extremely long. A lot of his shots are very peppering, nothing too powerful, but his volume is at a very high capacity. But strangely enough, Santiago Ponzinibbio's volume is actually higher than Neil Magny's. That's going to be a problem. If Ponzinibbio is going to be able to outland Magny in terms of sheer number, as well as being way more powerful, this is going to be a tough fight for Neil Magny. And another reason why it's going to be a tough fight is because Ponzinibbio's takedown defense is insane. He is very hard to keep down, especially in his recent fights. Earlier in the UFC, I mean, his takedown defense wasn't the greatest, and that's why you see his takedown defense below 60%. But if you look in the recent fights, I think it's a little bit higher than that now. And also, Ponzinibbio can go for takedowns himself. He is strong on top. He can land big ground and pound, and Neil Magny's Achilles heel are strong BJJ artists. Even though Ponzinibbio might not be as crafty or as slick on the ground, he is very strong on top. And on the feet, Magny throws a lot of jabs, a lot of straight punches, switches stances, will throw body kicks with the power leg. But I don't think it's a game he can win against Ponzinibbio, who will break through some of those punches with his own. His overhands are very heavy. If you allow him to set a pace on you, it's going to be at a very high rate. Shots are going to be coming all over the place. His footwork is going to be all over the place. He doesn't gas out really. Magny is a cardio machine, but Ponzinibbio can really go a strong 3 rounds with high volume. So in a 5-round fight, I believe he can still go that direction, but Ponzinibbio fights to finish. Maybe doesn't rush it a whole lot, but if a big shot presents itself, he will throw a shot to end the night. And for that, my prediction for the fight, I'm going to have to go with Santiago Ponzinibbio, and I'm going to have to go by a second round TKO. I think he's way too powerful. His overhand is going to be a big weapon against Neil Magny, and if Magny takes the orthodox stance, if he doesn't want to get in the opposite stances, Ponzinibbio has a very strong left hook as well as a jab. His jab is dynamite. I mean, he was able to drop Gunnar Nelson with it. I understand he poked Gunnar Nelson in the eye, but to force someone back like that with a jab, it speaks to his power. And any shot he throws at Magny is going to hurt. And Magny doesn't really check kicks. And Ponzinibbio can throw very powerful leg kicks as well. And let's look at the odds to see if there's anything pretty interesting about them. To be honest, I don't know most of these fighters on the card. Devin Powell is a little bit of an underdog, but I don't know who he's fighting. Bartosz Fabinski is someone to look out for because he is an underdog. He's a plus 145 to 150 underdog. It could be a pretty competitive fight, but I don't know if Prazeres is going to be able to keep it up on the feet with him. And Fabinski's takedown defense is really good, so that's one to look out for. Calvillo is an underdog, a very small underdog. That fight can go either way, to be honest, but I do think Calvillo can get it done, pushing the pace on Patel for the most part. Guido Canetti is almost a 3-1 underdog. He's like a 2.5-1 underdog. I mean, that's pretty big. And to be honest, I think it's very close. Marlon Vera is really good, but I think the betting odds, they're underestimating Canetti here. That's another one to really look out for. Johnny Walker is an underdog. Anything can happen in that fight, to be honest. I do think Roundtree should win the fight, but when guys like that go at it, and a guy like Walker with those flying knees and crazy kicks and stuff, if one of them lands, it could be a very short night. And the rest I pretty much agree with. I don't see anything else too crazy. So those are my predictions, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the prediction video, and if you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe. My podcast is almost done, so be tuned for that, and I'm going to make a breakdown of one of the fights this weekend, and it's going to come out earlier than before. I might make a post-fight reaction video again, so be looking for that if it happens. Depends how the night goes. And then my podcast is going to be earlier next week. So again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.